I am Clara, and I am 28 years old. If someone had told me years ago that my wedding day would be both the happiest and the most painful day of my life, I would have laughed. Because weddings are supposed to be about love, celebration, and new beginnings. But for me, it also became the day I saw people I trusted the most reveal who they truly were. I grew up in a small but comfortable home. My parents, Mark and Evelyn, had 2 daughters, me, the elder, and my sister Lily, who was 2 years younger. From childhood, I understood that I was the responsible one, the one who studied harder, who followed the rules, who made fewer mistakes. My parents often said they were proud of me, but their affection always seemed divided. Lily was different. She was the wild one, spontaneous, charming, often careless. When she broke something, I was the one who fixed it. When she forgot something, I covered for her. My parents would sigh and say, "That's just Lily being Lily." I used to smile, pretending it didn't hurt that they always found excuses for her, but rarely gave me the same grace. Growing up, I didn't ask for much. I studied hard, got into college, and started working soon after graduation. I wanted to help my parents. I sent money home when I could, even when my own rent and bills left me with little. I thought it was what good daughters did. But as time went on, I noticed something. Whenever I helped, my parents would thank me, but then talk about how difficult things were for Lily. It was as if everything I did was to make life easier for her. When she wanted a new phone, they asked if I could chip in. When she couldn't pay rent, they said, "You know how hard things are for your sister." I told myself it was temporary, that someday she'd find her footing. Then, I met Daniel. Daniel was calm, thoughtful, and had the kind of quiet strength that made me feel safe. We met at work. He was in the finance department, and I was in marketing. What started as casual conversations during coffee breaks grew into something deeper. He listened, truly listened. When I told him about my family, about how I often felt invisible despite everything I did, he didn't judge me. He just said, "Clara, you deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what you can give." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. After 2 years together, he proposed. It was simple, just us, on a park bench where we had our first picnic. He didn't go down on one knee in a grand gesture. He just looked at me and said, "I can't imagine my life without you." And I said yes, tears in my eyes, heart full. Telling my parents was complicated. My mom's first reaction wasn't happiness. It was surprise, and then calculation. "Daniel, what does his family do?" she asked. I told her his parents ran a successful family business, and she nodded slowly. "That's good," she said. "He sounds stable. Stable. Not kind, not loving. Just stable. But still, they agreed to come to the wedding. Lily, of course, was excited. Or at least she pretended to be. "Finally, someone's marrying the serious one," she teased. I laughed, but a small part of me wondered what she really felt. The months leading to the wedding were a blur of preparations, fittings, and family meetings. Daniel's parents were generous and respectful. They offered to help with some wedding expenses, and though I was uncomfortable, they said gently, "We just want you to start your life with ease." Meanwhile, my parents, well, they had opinions about everything. The guest list, the venue, even the color of the flowers. My mother wanted it to be classy, but affordable. My father wanted to invite distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. It was stressful, but I kept reminding myself that it would all be worth it when the day finally came. And then, the big day arrived. I woke up early, surrounded by the quiet hum of the bridal suite. My best friend, Jenna, was fixing my hair while I sat in front of the mirror. The makeup artist was busy, but my mind kept drifting. I thought about Daniel, about our vows, about how everything was about to change. When my parents arrived, my mother looked radiant. She hugged me tightly and said, "You look beautiful, Clara." It sounded sincere, and for a moment I believed it. My father smiled proudly. Even Lily looked emotional, though it was hard to tell with her. She'd always been difficult to read. The ceremony was perfect. Daniel looked at me like I was the only person in the world. When he said his vows, my hands trembled. And when I said mine, I meant every word. For the first time in a long time, I felt chosen. After the ceremony came the reception, laughter, speeches, dancing. Daniel's parents gave a short toast. His mother, Grace, took my hand and said, "Welcome to the family, Clara. You're like a real daughter to us now." Everyone clapped. My heart swelled. Then came the moment that would burn itself into my memory. Daniel's parents walked us outside to the driveway, where a white car stood waiting, brand new, gleaming under the fairy lights. A ribbon wrapped around it like a gift. Grace smiled and said, "We wanted you to have something to start your journey together." "It's yours," my eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to, but we wanted to," she interrupted kindly. "You deserve this," the guests cheered. Cameras flashed. My parents came over, smiling for the photos. My mom hugged me and whispered, "Congratulations, honey." For that small second, I thought, maybe she was truly happy for me. But then, as soon as the crowd dispersed, she said softly but firmly, "Clara, we need to talk. Privately." Confused, I followed her and my father to a quiet corner near the banquet hall. Their smiles faded the moment we were alone. My father cleared his throat. "That car," he began, "you'll be giving it to your sister." I blinked. "What?" My mother folded her arms. "Lily deserves it more, Clara. She doesn't have a car and she needs one to get to work. You and Daniel can share his." "You don't need to." I stood there, stunned. "Mom, Dad, they gave that car to me as a wedding gift. How can I—" Mom cut me off. "You're married now. You don't need it. Lily's struggling, and this would really help her. She's your sister. Don't be selfish." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The shock was too much. My wedding night, the happiest night of my life, and my own parents were already demanding I hand over something that wasn't even theirs to take. They stared at me, expecting me to agree, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's when Daniel appeared. He must have noticed the tension because his usual soft smile was gone. "Is everything all right here?" he asked gently but firmly. My father forced a smile. Yes, we were just explaining something to Clara. The car," but Daniel interrupted him. "The car is a gift from my parents to my wife. I think there's no explaining needed." My mother frowned. "We were just saying it would be nice if she passed it on to her sister. She doesn't really need it." Daniel's tone stayed calm, but his eyes were sharp. "You're right, she doesn't need it. But she deserves it. It's hers." There was a quiet, heavy pause. My parents didn't know what to say. Then Daniel turned to me and said softly, "Clara, you don't owe anyone your happiness. Not tonight, not ever." Something in me broke and healed at the same time. My parents stood there, speechless. My mother's lips trembled slightly, and my father's face turned pale. They had never been challenged before, especially not like that. That night, as Daniel and I drove away from the venue, the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. He held my hand and said, "Now it's time to start drawing lines, Clara. You've given enough." And that was the moment I realized, calm doesn't mean weak. Sometimes the quietest people are the ones who carry the strongest storms inside them. But the story didn't end there. Because when I chose to stop being the family's silent provider, things changed. The balance shifted, and that shift revealed even more than I expected. Things about my parents, about Lily, and even about myself. That night was only the beginning of what I now call my calm revenge. When Daniel and I got home that night, after the wedding celebrations had finally ended, the exhaustion hit me like a wave, but beneath the tiredness was something deeper. A quiet ache I couldn't name. I sat in our new living room, still in my wedding dress, the soft lights of the apartment flickering over the walls. Daniel brought me a cup of tea, and that was his way. When others offered grand gestures, he offered warmth. He sat beside me and said softly, "You don't have to talk about it now, but I saw how they looked at you when they said that about the car." I sighed, staring into my cup. "It's always been like that," I said quietly. "I love them, Daniel. They're my parents. But sometimes I feel like I'm not really a daughter, just a resource." He reached over and touched my hand. "You're not a resource. You're a person, and it's okay to draw boundaries, even with people you love." I nodded, but part of me still resisted. My whole life, I had been taught that being a good daughter meant sacrificing. That love was proven through endurance. You endure hurt and you still stay. You give more, even when you have little. That was how I was raised. But sitting there that night, beside a man who valued my peace more than my obedience, something in me began to shift quietly, like an old door finally unlocking after years of rust. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I even got out of bed. It was a message from my mother. Mom, good morning, dear. Hope you slept well. When can we come get the car for Lily? She's excited. No hello, no warmth, no congratulations. Just straight to the point. I stared at the screen, not sure whether to laugh or cry. I showed it to Daniel. He read it, sighed, and said, "You don't have to reply right now. Let's have breakfast first." But my stomach was in knots. My mind kept circling around one question. Why couldn't they just let me be happy? That day we decided to drive the car, the one Daniel's parents gave us, to visit them and thank them properly. His parents were overjoyed to see us. Grace hugged me tightly, and his father, Henry, smiled proudly. "We wanted to give you something meaningful," Henry said. "Something that would remind you that marriage isn't just about love. It's about having support, too." Their kindness made me emotional. I tried to hold it together, but tears escaped anyway. Grace noticed and gently said, "You okay, dear?" I nodded, smiling through the tears. I'm not used to this kind of warmth," I admitted. She patted my hand. "Then get used to it. You're family now." When we got back home, I finally replied to my mother's message. Me. Mom, I appreciate your concern, but the car is a gift from Daniel's parents to me. I can't give it away. She replied almost immediately. Mom, don't be selfish, Clara. Lily really needs it. You and Daniel can manage with one car. She's your sister. Family should help each other. There it was again. That same word they had used to silence me my whole life. Family. A word that meant giving up pieces of myself so they could stay comfortable. That night, Daniel sat beside me and said, "You know what's interesting? Every time you say no to them, you feel guilty. But they don't feel guilty for asking." He was right. I did feel guilty, but also relieved. Days passed. The tension with my parents grew silently like a slow storm. They stopped calling as often. When they did, the conversations were short and distant. Then one afternoon, about 3 weeks after the wedding, my sister called. "Clara," she said in her usual half-sweet, half-demanding tone. "Mom said you don't want to give me the car. Why not? You don't even need it." I tried to stay calm. "Lily, it's not about need. It's about principle. It was a wedding gift. You know that," she scoffed. "Come on, Clara, you're being dramatic. Mom and Dad always said you were too serious about things. It's just a car." I took a breath. "Then why do you want it so badly if it's just a car?" There was silence on the line. Then she muttered something under her breath and hung up. That was when I knew. This wasn't about the car. It never was. It was about control. My parents had always found ways to remind me that my achievements, my happiness, even my possessions were not entirely mine. They were family property, and by refusing this time, I had broken an unspoken rule. The quiet war had begun. Weeks turned into months. My parents barely visited. My mother stopped answering my calls. My father sent the occasional text, short and cold. "Hope you're fine." No warmth, no love. Just distance. It hurt, of course. But strangely, it also gave me space. The kind of space I'd never had before. Daniel and I settled into married life. I started seeing how peace could feel when it wasn't constantly interrupted by guilt. One evening, Daniel came home with a thoughtful look. "My mom was saying," he began, "she's been thinking about helping you start that small marketing consultancy you've talked about. You're talented, Clara. You should have your own thing." I blinked, surprised. "She said that?" He nodded. "She sees how smart you are, and she believes in you." That sentence stayed with me. Someone believed in me, without asking for anything in return. Over the next few months, With Grace's encouragement, I slowly started building my own freelance marketing business. At first it was small. 1 client, then 2, then a steady trickle. Daniel supported me quietly, never once pushing, just being there. Meanwhile, my parents stayed distant. Until one day, my mom called out of nowhere. "Clara," she said, her voice oddly cheerful, "we're having a family dinner this weekend. You and Daniel must come. It's been so long." I hesitated. Part of me was suspicious, but another part of me missed them. Against Daniel's gentle caution, I agreed. When we arrived at my parents' house, I noticed how much had changed. The furniture was new, the house freshly painted. I knew they weren't doing well financially before, so I wondered where the money came from. Lily greeted us first, all smiles and exaggerated warmth. "Clara, you look so fancy now. Married life suits you." I smiled politely, but something about her tone felt mocking. Dinner started off civil. My mother talked about how Lily had been working so hard lately, and how things were finally turning around. My father nodded proudly. I listened, half detached, just letting them talk. Then, out of nowhere, my mother said, "You know, Lily just bought herself a car last month. A used one, but still. Isn't that great?" Daniel smiled politely. "That's good. Congratulations, Lily," Lily grinned. "Yeah, though it would have been easier if I had the one from your wedding. But it's fine, I managed." The table went silent. My parents avoided my eyes. Daniel put down his fork gently and said, "Good for you, Lily. It's important to work for what you have." The air froze. My sister's smile faltered. My mother's expression hardened slightly. I stayed quiet, but inside, something warm flickered. Not anger, not revenge yet, but a slow, steady sense of justice. That night, as we drove home, I said quietly, "Daniel, do you ever think I'm being too harsh? Maybe I should have just given her the car." He glanced at me, then smiled faintly. "No, Clara, you're not being harsh. You're just no longer easy to use. People mistake that for cruelty." I looked out the window. The city lights blurred into soft colors. I realized he was right. For the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for protecting what was mine. And life began to change. My small marketing business grew quickly. Word spread, and within a year, I had a handful of loyal clients. I started earning well. Not extravagant, but enough to stand on my own without leaning on anyone. Daniel was proud, but more importantly, I was proud. One afternoon, I received a message from my father. "Dad, can you come over this weekend? We need to talk." It had been months since they last reached out. I agreed, curious but cautious. When Daniel and I arrived, my parents seemed uneasy. My mom avoided my eyes. My father tried to sound casual. "Clara, we're a little behind on some payments. You've been doing well, right? Maybe you can help us with a small loan." My heart sank. There it was again. The same old pattern. But this time I smiled gently and said, "Dad, I can't. We're saving for something important." "I'm sorry," he frowned. "You've changed, Clara. You used to help your family." I met his gaze calmly. "No, Dad. I used to be used by my family. There's a difference." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother's lips tightened. My father looked down. That was the night I realized. My calmness disturbed them more than any anger could. They expected guilt, tears, excuses. Instead, they got quiet resolve. And that was the beginning of my quiet. Deliberate revenge, not one of cruelty, but of peace. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about taking something from others. It's about reclaiming what they took from you. Your voice, your boundaries, your peace. And as my life began to bloom, theirs began to unravel. But that came later. The days after that conversation with my parents were strangely peaceful. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying a hidden weight on my back. There was no guilt eating away at me, no pressure to fix anyone's mess. I simply lived my life, quietly, steadily, and for myself. Daniel noticed it too. One morning, as we sat having coffee, he smiled and said, "You seem lighter lately, like you've been breathing easier." I laughed softly, maybe because I stopped apologizing for existing. He nodded thoughtfully. "That's the calm I always knew was in you. It's just, now it's showing." I didn't realize then how much that calmness would soon disturb my family. When people are used to you bending, standing straight feels like rebellion. My work was doing better than I ever expected. Clients started referring me to others. My reputation grew quietly, not because of loud marketing, but because I treated every project with care. The kind of care I used to pour into pleasing people who never appreciated it. Now that energy was mine to use. One afternoon, Grace, my mother-in-law, called. "Clara, would you like to help us with a small project for our company? We're rebranding some of our services." It was a big opportunity. Her family's business had been around for decades. They could have easily hired a large agency, but she said gently, "I trust you more." That project became the turning point. It went beautifully. Their company saw a surge in engagement, and word spread fast in the local business community. Soon other companies approached me for help. I started hiring 2 assistants. The business that once fit in my laptop was now taking shape in a small, cozy office. Daniel was proud beyond words. His support never felt performative. He wasn't the type to boast. He just celebrated quietly, in everyday gestures. Cooking dinner when I was tired, leaving notes on my desk that said things like, "You did great today," but as my world grew brighter, I began hearing whispers from the one I had left behind. My sister Lily had quit yet another job. My mother called one evening, her voice lined with exhaustion and guilt. "Your sister's been struggling again. She's staying with us for now. Things are difficult." I kept my tone calm. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. I hope she figures things out." There was a pause. Then came the familiar sigh. "You know, if you could just help a little." I stopped her gently but firmly. "Mom, please, I can't do that anymore." Her voice rose slightly. "She's your sister, Clara." I kept my voice steady. "Yes, but she's also an adult. Just like I was, when I had to handle everything on my own." Silence. Then the quiet, wounded tone she always used when she didn't get her way. "You've changed, Clara. You've become cold." After we hung up, I sat still for a long time. Not cold, I thought. Just done burning myself to keep everyone else warm. Over the next few months, I saw less and less of them. There were birthdays I wasn't invited to. Family gatherings I only heard about from distant relatives. But instead of sadness, I felt peace. Still, life has a way of circling back. One late afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it was my father. His tone was strained. "Clara, can you come to the house tonight? We need to talk." I hesitated, feeling that old unease return. "Is everything okay?" He sighed. "It's about Lily. Please, just come." Daniel offered to go with me, but I said no. "Let me handle this," I told him. I wanted to face them on my own this time. Not as the obedient daughter, but as the woman I'd become. When I arrived, the house felt smaller somehow, dimmer. My mother sat on the couch, her face drawn with worry. Lily was there too, looking disheveled but still wearing that familiar smirk. "What's going on?" I asked. My father cleared his throat. "Your sister's been in some trouble. She borrowed money from someone. A lot. We're trying to help her pay it back, but my stomach tightened." "How much?" He hesitated. "About 25,000. I stared at them, speechless. 25,000? How could she? My mother cut in quickly. "She made a mistake, Clara. She thought she could handle it. We're just asking for your help. Just this once." Lily sat silently, arms crossed, eyes avoiding mine. She didn't look guilty, just embarrassed at being caught. "Why would you think I can just hand over that much money?" I asked quietly. My father's voice hardened. "Because you have it. You're doing well. You can afford to help your family." There it was again, that entitlement, the same tone that used to make me give in. But not anymore. I took a slow breath. "Dad, I can't fix this for her." "I won't." My mother's eyes flashed. "You're really going to let your sister suffer? After everything we did for you?" I met her gaze evenly. "What did you do for me, Mom?" "You raised me, yes. But you also taught me that my worth only existed in what I could give. You let me work myself to exhaustion just to make things easier for Lily. You made me feel guilty for being responsible. That's not love, that's control. The room went quiet. Even Lily looked shocked. My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. I stood up slowly. If you want to help her sell something, make her face her choices. But don't come to me expecting me to rescue her from herself. And I walked out. That drive home was one of the calmest I've ever had. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just felt done. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. When I got home, Daniel was waiting. He didn't ask questions. He just opened his arms and I leaned into him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said softly, "You didn't go there to argue, did you?" I shook my head. "No, I went there to end a pattern." He smiled faintly. "And you did." The next few weeks were strangely quiet. My parents didn't call again. I heard from a cousin that Lily had moved out, apparently after a fight with them. I didn't ask for details. I had finally learned that not knowing everything was a form of peace, too. Months passed. My business continued to grow, slowly but surely. I hired more people, rented a bigger office. Sometimes I'd look around and realize this was the life I had built. Without handouts, without guilt. Then one morning, I got an unexpected email. It was from a local business association. They were nominating me for a Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. I was stunned. Daniel was thrilled. "You see, Clara, the world finally sees what I saw in you from the start." The award ceremony was simple but beautiful. As I stood on the stage, giving a short thank you speech, I saw Daniel in the front row, smiling proudly. Behind him I noticed two familiar faces, my parents. They were standing quietly at the back of the hall. After the event ended, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to avoid them, but another part wanted to face them, calmly, on my own terms. They approached me. My mother's eyes were red. My father looked older, tired. "You've done well, Clara," he said quietly. I smiled gently. "Thank you, Dad." My mother tried to speak, but her voice trembled. "We didn't realize how much we hurt you until you stopped trying to please us." I looked at her, really looked, and saw regret there. "Maybe too late, but real. I know," I said softly. "But sometimes, the only way people see the harm they do is when you stop letting them do it." She nodded, tears falling silently. "We're proud of you," I believed her. For the first time, I believed she meant it. When I walked out that night, Daniel took my hand and said, "You didn't need revenge after all, did you?" I thought about it. "No," I said quietly. "Not the way people think of it. My revenge was calm. It was simply living a life they couldn't control anymore." He smiled. That slow, knowing smile I loved. And that's the best kind. But life wasn't done teaching lessons. Because as time went on, my sister reappeared. Not out of spite this time, but out of need. She came to me, humbled, with eyes that had finally seen consequences. And though I didn't plan to hurt her, the way I handled her next, that became the final act of my calm revenge. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, touching the corner of our bed with a gentle glow. For the first time in days, I felt something like peace. Liam was still asleep beside me, one arm draped loosely over my waist. His steady breathing felt like a quiet promise that I wasn't alone in this anymore. But that peace didn't last long. Because reality, no matter how much you want to avoid it, always catches up. By afternoon, I received a message from my mother. Just 2 words, "We'll talk." My heart clenched. I didn't know what kind of talk it would be. An apology, another demand, or just another way to make me feel guilty. When I called her, she didn't even wait for me to speak. "Clara, your father and I are very disappointed," she said flatly. "In what?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "In how you've been behaving. We heard from your sister that you're keeping the car." I took a slow breath. "Mom, the car was a wedding gift from Liam's parents. It was given to me, not to share, not to pass on." She scoffed, that sharp little sound she used when she thought I was being dramatic. "You've changed. Marriage has made you selfish. All these years we raised you, sacrificed for you, And now when it's your turn to give something back, you refuse? Something inside me finally cracked. Not in anger, but in clarity. I realized my mother wasn't just being unfair. She had never truly seen me as someone with my own life. I was a means to an end, a solution to her problems, a bridge for my sister's wants. "Mom," I said slowly, "you didn't raise me to be a donor for my sister's comfort. You raised me to be a person who thinks for herself. I love you, but this manipulation has to stop." There was a long silence. Then her voice turned cold. "So you're really choosing them over your family?" "I'm choosing myself," I said quietly. "For the first time." She hung up. I stood there, staring at the blank screen, feeling a strange mix of sadness and freedom. It's a strange thing. The moment you stop living under someone else's shadow, the world doesn't suddenly turn bright and easy. It feels empty at first, like standing in a room after all the noise has gone. But in that quiet, you can finally hear your own heartbeat. Liam listened silently as I told him about the call. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, just held my hand until I was done. Then he said something that stayed with me. "Sometimes peace comes only after you burn the bridge that was hurting you." His words gave me strength. Over the next few days, I focused on rebuilding. Not just my boundaries, but my sense of self. I went back to work after our short honeymoon, determined to focus on what I could control. But my family wasn't done. 2 weeks later, at my office, my sister Emily showed up unannounced. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and entitlement. "Clara, how could you? How could you be so cruel?" I closed my office door quietly. "Emily, calm down. What happened?" "You know what happened. Mom said you refused to give me the car. She told everyone you've changed, that Liam is controlling you." I felt my stomach twist. "That's not true, and you know it. Emily, I have never said no to you before. Ever. Can you name one time I didn't help you?" She looked away. "This isn't about that. It's just, you don't need that car. You already have Liam's car. I need it more." There it was again, the unspoken rule of our family. Your need doesn't matter if someone else needs more. "Emily," I said softly, "the difference between wanting something and deserving it isn't just about need. It's about respect, and I'm tired of giving up pieces of my life for someone who never once asked how it affects me." Her eyes filled with tears. "So that's it? You've become one of those wives who forgets her family after marriage?" I felt a sting, but I didn't flinch. "No, Emily, I've become a woman who finally remembers herself." She left, slamming the door behind her. My coworkers pretended not to notice, but the silence in the office afterward was heavy. That night, I told Liam everything. He nodded and said, "It's time they understand who you really are. But maybe there's a way to show it, calmly." And that's when our quiet plan began. We didn't want confrontation. We didn't want to humiliate anyone. We wanted to teach a lesson, one built on dignity and truth. A few weeks later, Liam's parents invited both families to dinner. It was meant to be a small celebration, a welcome to the family kind of evening. When I heard about it, part of me hesitated. I knew my parents would attend, and the last thing I wanted was another scene. But Liam squeezed my hand and said, "Let them see the woman I married, not the one they think they can control." The night of the dinner, I wore a simple light blue dress. Nothing flashy, just something that felt like me. When we arrived, everyone was already there. My parents sat stiffly across from Liam's cheerful mother and father. My sister smiled awkwardly but didn't say much. Dinner started politely, with small talk and careful laughter. Then, halfway through, my mother said in a falsely sweet tone, "So, Clara, how's the car? I hope you're taking good care of it." I felt the air tighten around us. Everyone knew what she was hinting at. Liam placed his fork down gently and smiled. "Actually, the car is doing great, but Clara and I decided to make a small change." My mother's eyes lit up with curiosity, probably assuming we'd given in. "Oh, what kind of change?" Liam looked at me and I nodded for him to continue. "Well," he said, "Clara wanted to make sure that cars symbolized something special. something that reflected how she was treated with kindness and respect when she joined our family. So she decided to donate it to a women's foundation, one that helps single mothers get back on their feet. The silence that followed was sharp. My mother's smile froze. My sister's mouth fell open. Liam continued calmly. We both agreed that generosity should come from the heart, not from guilt. We're proud of what that car will do now. I looked directly at my mother then, not with anger, but with quiet strength. You wanted it to mean something for the family, Mom. Now it does. Just not in the way you expected. Her face went pale. My father looked embarrassed, my sister speechless. But Liam's parents were smiling, not smugly, but warmly, like people who understood grace when they saw it. After dinner, as people slowly began to leave, my mother approached me near the door. Her voice trembled. You made me look foolish in front of them. I met her gaze. No, Mom, I made myself visible for the first time. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked away, her shoulders stiff, her pride wounded. Driving home that night, I didn't feel triumphant. Revenge, at least the kind I had imagined in my darkest moments, wasn't satisfying anymore. What I felt was quieter, like reclaiming a piece of myself I had long abandoned. Liam reached for my hand and said softly, "That was perfect, Clara. Calm, clear, and final." I smiled. It wasn't revenge, really. It was closure. He looked at me with that gentle understanding again. Sometimes, those are the same thing. In the days that followed, word spread quickly in my family circle. Some relatives sided with my parents. Others reached out privately to say they admired my decision. My sister didn't speak to me for months, though I later heard she'd started volunteering at that same foundation. Maybe guilt, maybe inspiration. Either way, it was change. And change, even when born from conflict, is how healing begins. The weeks after that dinner felt oddly quiet. Not peaceful, exactly, but different. Like the air after a long storm when everything is still, but you can smell that something has shifted. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel chained to guilt. I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for living my own life. I wasn't naive. I knew my parents would talk about me, about the embarrassment I had caused them. But I also knew they'd do it behind closed doors, in hushed tones, because deep down, even they understood something had changed permanently. It was strange to wake up in the morning and not immediately brace myself for their disapproval. For so long, their opinions had defined who I was allowed to be. Now I could just breathe. Liam noticed the difference too. One evening, while we were having dinner at home, he said quietly, "You've stopped apologizing before speaking. You used to do that every time you had an opinion." I smiled, a little embarrassed. Old habits. I spent years trying not to upset anyone. He reached across the table, brushing his thumb against my hand. "Now you don't need to. You just need to be you." That simple sentence meant more than he probably realized. Over the next few months, I started writing again, something I hadn't done since college. Short essays at first, then personal reflections about family, boundaries, and learning to stand tall without shouting. Writing helped me process what had happened. It helped me understand that revenge doesn't always mean destroying someone. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your peace after years of being denied it. But even though I was healing, there were still ripples from the confrontation. My mother avoided me completely. No calls, no messages. She didn't even send a card for my birthday that year. I told myself I was fine with it, but the truth is it hurt. More than I wanted to admit. No matter how toxic things had been, a small part of me still wanted her approval. Still hoped she'd one day look at me not as a tool, but as a daughter. And then one afternoon, out of nowhere, I received a text message from Emily. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. When she came over, she looked different, not physically, but in her energy. Quieter, softer. She sat across from me, nervously clutching a cup of tea. "Clara," she began, her voice low. "I need to apologize." I didn't say anything. I just let her continue. I was angry. "I thought you were being selfish. Mom kept saying you'd changed and I believed her. But after everything, I started to see it differently. I got involved with that foundation you donated the car to. That caught me off guard." "You did?" She nodded. "Yeah. At first, I just wanted to prove something. I'm not even sure what. But then I met these women. Women who had nothing, but still smiled, still tried every day to build a life. And I realized you weren't being cruel. You were trying to do something meaningful." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't deserve anything good." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. All the anger I'd carried for months, maybe even years, started to dissolve into something else. Maybe forgiveness, maybe exhaustion. I wasn't sure. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." We sat in silence for a while, just sipping tea. No grand gestures, no dramatic reconciliation, just quiet understanding. And that, I think, was what I'd needed all along. Emily didn't stay long, but as she left, she said something that stayed with me. "You know, Mom's been thinking. She won't admit it, but I think she misses you." I didn't respond. I didn't want to hope, because hope, when it came to my mother, had always been a fragile thing. A few weeks later, I saw her again, unexpectedly. Liam and I had been invited to a cousin's engagement party, and she was there, sitting at a table near the entrance. For a moment, I considered leaving, but Liam looked at me and said softly, "Whatever happens, you'll handle it with grace." "You always do." When my mother saw me, her expression shifted. Surprise, hesitation, then something unreadable. She didn't get up, but when I walked over and greeted her, she actually smiled. "Clara," she said, her tone softer than I remembered. "You look well." It wasn't much, but it was something. I sat beside her for a few minutes, and we exchanged small talk, the kind of conversation that dances around everything that actually matters. Then, before I left to join Liam, she reached for my hand. "You've grown stronger," she said quietly. "Your father doesn't say it, but he's proud of you." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you, Mom," she gave a faint nod. And I was wrong. About the car, about many things. I didn't know what to say. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to hear those words. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need them to feel complete anymore. They were nice to hear, yes, but I had already moved past needing them. That realization was my real revenge. Not the kind that humiliates someone or proves them wrong, but the kind that silently reclaims your dignity after years of letting others define your worth. Life settled after that. Emily and I became closer, not in the dependent, lopsided way we used to be, but in a healthier, mutual way. She learned to stand on her own feet, and I learned to let go of the need to fix everyone. As for my parents, our relationship remained complicated. There were good days and bad ones. Days when my mother would call just to ask about my health, and others when old habits crept in. But I learned to keep boundaries. I learned that love doesn't mean surrendering yourself. One night, a few months after everything had calmed down, Liam and I were sitting on our balcony, sipping coffee and watching the city lights flicker below. He asked quietly, "Do you ever wish it had gone differently?" I thought about it for a moment before answering. "Sometimes, yes. I wish it hadn't taken conflict to make them see me, but maybe that was the only way." He nodded. "You handled it with grace, Clara. You didn't yell. You didn't fight dirty. You showed them who you were by simply being calm and firm. That's not easy," I smiled. "Maybe revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Maybe sometimes it's just peaceful." He laughed softly. "Peaceful revenge. That should be the title of your book." I laughed too, but inside his words lingered. Peaceful revenge. It sounded strange, but it fit. Because what I had done wasn't out of spite. It was out of self-respect. Weeks later, I sat down to write one last essay about it. It began like this. Some people think revenge means hurting someone the way they hurt you. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is living without the chains they tried to wrap around your heart. It's smiling genuinely after years of forced obedience. It's walking away, and not to prove a point, but to find peace. When I finished writing, I read it aloud to Liam. He just nodded and said, "That's the most you thing I've ever heard." Looking back now, I don't think of what happened as a feud or even a battle. It was a lesson, one that took me 28 years to learn. My mother smiled at my wedding and said, "We'll pass on the car to your sister." At that moment, I thought I was losing everything: respect, love, family. But in truth, I was gaining something far more important: the courage to stand tall, the grace to respond without bitterness, and the calm to let my actions speak louder than anger ever could. If I had screamed that night, maybe they would have called me ungrateful. But by staying calm, by choosing a path that reflected who I wanted to be, I turned their manipulation into my freedom. And in the end, that quiet victory was more satisfying than any dramatic revenge could ever be. Because real strength isn't about control. It's about release. Look at Liam sometimes and realize that everything that happened, the pain, the disappointment, the heartbreak, all led me to this moment of peace. To this man who never asked me to choose between love and self-respect. And I think, maybe life has its own way of balancing the scales. I forgave my mother, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved to be free. I forgave my sister because she was just another product of the same environment I had escaped. And I forgave myself for all the times I stayed silent when I should have spoken. Revenge, for me, wasn't about taking something from them. It was about giving something back to myself. So when people ask me how I handled it, the manipulation, the guilt, the pressure, I just smile and say, with calm. Always with calm. Because peace, when it's earned through quiet strength, becomes its own form of poetic justice. And maybe that's what my calm revenge truly means. If you enjoyed this story and its message of grace, boundaries, and quiet strength, remember to like, share, and subscribe to my Calm Revenge. Your support helps me bring more stories that show how calm isn't weakness, it's power. Stay strong. Stay calm, and I'll see you in the next story.